welcome to our Facebook Live Q&A, and so sorry we have had some major technical glitches this morning. I'm sure everybody everywhere knows what that feels like. Today's subject is all about top tips for raising teens, of course, particularly around conflict, but also about communication, which obviously is key. I'm Daisy Cresswell. I'm founder of Make Good Trouble. We're a social enterprise and media production company, and our aim is to help adolescents and families improve their mental health and emotional well-being. Today, I am really excited once again to be joined by Kit Messenger, the lovely Kit, who is a former primary school head teacher and co-founder of Changing Chances. Due to the fact that we've lost 5 minutes, Kit, I'm going to launch straight into the questions, and these questions have all been gleaned from parents. So parents who are desperate to communicate better, really, with their teens. And so to start with the basic, my teenager won't speak to me. I was thinking about this question, and I was thinking about non-verbal communication, actually, and how huge that is, how we can read what our teenagers are how they're communicating non-verbally, but we don't know how to interpret that as parents because we're not taught. So what's your tips, Kit, for if a teenager just won't open up and talk and there's a problem?
I think my first tip is not to force it, because so often I think there's a reason why teenagers don't want to talk, and sometimes it's because they think the thing that the adult wants to talk to them about is going to be another thing that puts pressure on them or nags them, or is not a conversation they particularly want to have. So you have to, it's a bit like putting a friend of mine, in fact, she's an inspector from the police, she used to say, you've got to put money in the bank. So you've got to, and I've always remembered that. It's a really great phrase. So thank you, Kaj. It's to put money in the bank. So if you want to have those more difficult conversations about things that are worrying you or concerning you, or helping around the house, or their risky behaviours, or any of those things, you can't launch into that unless you've got a lot of money in the bank in terms of the relationship bank. So at the beginning, it's about I call it dropping the map pin, where you make some positive comment, but sometimes what teenagers think is going to happen is, oh no, this is going to turn into another intensive chat, and it's the last thing I want to do. So if you just say something and walk away, I always think a really good time to talk to young people is when hands are busy and brains are free. And I think it's something I've said before, where you're in the middle of cooking, or you're doing the laundry, you're doing something where you're busy, and you just say something like, oh, your hair looks nice today, and you walk away. And you've got to do but it has to be genuine. It's got to be authentic, because teenagers sniff out inauthenticity.
Oh, God, yeah.
And they sniff out when you're doing it for any other reason. So you've got to be genuine in it, but you have to, it's about, for some parents, they just need, and it's really tough, to bite their tongue till it probably bleeds a few times before they start trying to bring up the difficult stuff, because children have to trust that you're really on their side, that you're not going to coerce them or make them do anything. You're not going to nag them, lecture them, push them, pressure them, all of those things, which can or blame them, threaten them, bribe them, which are unbelievably common within most households, because we're human. We don't mean to do it, but we desperately want our young people to do well. We want our children to do well. So that cortisol, because we feel worried about it, that raises our own cortisol levels in our blood, in our bodies.
Can you remind me about cortisol again? Which one is that?
Cortisol is a stress chemical.
Right.
I always think of it in terms of blue. It's not blue, but I just think of it in terms of blue. And I just think, just because sometimes having a hook, I now say to myself, I can feel my blue stress chemicals rising on this one.
Surprising you haven't made it red, because that would be...
Well, red is when it gets so bad that you really are on high alert. So blue is when you're a bit worried about your child, and maybe they've started seeing someone you don't want them to see, or they're smoking or whatever, they're doing things that worry you. So you've got this level of cortisol, this stress chemical in your body. Red stress, I call it, would be something where they've disappeared and you haven't seen them for 24 hours and you're in absolute panic. That's your red stress.
Okay.
But just generally, what happens is the adult, often because they're worried, they start with those levels of cortisol quite high, and that leads them to put more pressure than is probably the right thing to do at that time for that young person.
And also, I think that also reflects on their body language, because I've noticed, obviously it's quite an obvious thing, but if I'm really cross with my daughter, I'm all over the, but my body feels tense.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
The money in the bank thing, I think, is really interesting. And my instant reaction was, what's the ratio between compliments and getting something through? Are we talking 80% compliments and 20% getting something through? Or, it
probably is. It's probably, and it's not necessarily compliments. It's 80% of building the relationship probably gives you 20% of actually tackling some difficult stuff. Okay. And unfortunately, parents do it either as, I've done 20% of relationship building and 80% of trying to shift my child into a different direction. And it probably, some people, I've worked with some families where there's been a real rift between the adults, the parents, and the young person, and it's taken 100% of relationship building for some time.
Yeah.
And I've said, don't bring anything up. Don't raise it. You have to just put that aside for now. Yes, there's loads of stuff in the kitchen sink. Yes, the place is a mess. No, they're not going to school on time. All of those things. But if you actually can't even, if you're not even getting on, you get nowhere. Yeah. So it is about that. And it's connection. And there's something about connection that is different than giving a compliment. It's a very, very different thing. Connection is where that person feels that you really understand what it's like being them. Daniel Siegel has a great phrase. He says, they need to feel felt. And I love that phrase. Do they feel felt? And I think that takes it to quite a different level.
In their shoes.
Yeah, and it's that deep empathy. And I don't know if you're familiar with Brené Brown, but she's done some great stuff.
Yeah,
and she does a great one, which was what is empathy. It's really worth watching her clip, and she talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy, and it's a great one for parents to watch, because sympathy, oh poor you, empathy is and sympathy is like, oh, you'll be fine, don't worry, you'll be fine. Where parents say, a real classic is the young person comes home and they're in absolute floods of tears, and they go, he doesn't love me anymore, she doesn't love me, and they've just separated with their boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, and the parent says things like, oh, other people will come along and they'll work good enough for you, and you're beautiful anyway, all of that stuff, which is with hugely great intentions. But what ends up happening is that young person doesn't feel felt. I call that the brush under. That's the brush under. It's like
I've actually been in that situation where I've made it miles worse. I've said compliments to how you're beautiful. There'll be plenty more fish to see, and they get really cross with me, and then I'm going, and then I'm getting cross, so they're getting cross.
Yeah. So don't do a carpet sweeper. So I suppose in terms of that, my teenager isn't speaking to me. My first tip is try to connect in a really authentic, real way.
Money in the bank.
And so put the money in the bank. And sometimes that connection needs that the parent has to actually take the step forward to do some things that maybe aren't really their sort of thing. You've got to go, what would my child really want to do right now? Would they really want to hang out with me? Maybe not. So maybe that's not the way for me to connect with them. Or maybe they would. Maybe if I take them out for a meal, maybe if I actually show a bit of interest in the things that they're interested in. So I worked with one family, and it was really the parent, once she started saying, oh, let's do a TikTok together clip, they started connecting, and before that parent had been, oh, I don't even understand about TikTok, I don't like it. And it was about you've got to walk across the bridge to your young person. Don't expect them to walk over the bridge to you. That would be, yeah.
I think that, because looking at some of the comments on the Facebook group, there's a lot around kids not doing their homework and parents not getting anywhere with that. And what's been great is some of the other parents have been helping with advice, and one of them mentioned Brian Brown. I can't say her name, sorry. So that was great. But I think that there is, you know, if you've got pressure on lots of sides, which is the school contacting you saying they're not doing their homework, and they're not, you know, they're not doing their homework, but normally, you know, it's I think from a parental point of view, it's trying to de-escalate the amount of stress that you're under to be able to even cope with it, because then you feel, you know, I've had this with me, you feel incredibly judged if you can't get your young person to sort of toe the line. And
I'm hoping we're entering a new era in terms of that, where schools do start recognising that families and parents and households are under immense pressure already, and sometimes actually that's not the nut to crack, the homework nut. And so I think the first thing for me is for the parent to we've got to take perspectives, haven't we? Sometimes not doing that bit of homework becomes such a battle that it's actually, I said to one parent, the minute there's something like that, say, which is more important, the relationship with my child or this one thing? So the relationship with my child, or the fact that she's wearing more makeup than I would have wanted. The relationship with my child, or the fact that the washing up keeps not getting done. That's not to be permissive, because I don't agree with permissiveness. I think one of my mantras is good for me, good for you, good for everyone. And for us to encourage our young people, in the end, to be able to look at different perspectives, take into account other people within their lives, but that we've also got to recognise they might not be there yet. And it doesn't just happen like that. We have to work with them over time. So when it comes to something like homework, the first thing is to be curious. I mean, one of our mantras is curious, not furious. I'm wondering what's going on for you with the homework, and also to be empathic. Yeah, I really get it. If I could choose between watching telly and seeing my friends or getting on with the homework, I wonder which I would choose. I really understand that that's really hard for you. It's really difficult to motivate.
I know, Kit, that you're using what we call clean questions, aren't you?
Yeah.
Using words like no. It's good to have some of those tips on how to ask kinds of questions.
Yeah, I think there's 3 questions that I would really recommend that parents use, because much of our questioning is a bit coercive often. People don't even realise. It's worth sometimes recording yourself, because you realise that questioning sometimes is something like, I'm trying to think of an example, but it's sometimes parents question to get the answer they want.
Why haven't you done your homework? There's the first one.
Yeah, or the why. The why question is so common. Well, half the time, someone, you know, if you say that to adults, half the time they don't know why, you know, or why haven't you got on with that? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. So the why question I would always really avoid. I'd really avoid the why, because so much of young people's behaviors is really subconscious. They don't know why they do things they do. They haven't been in their brain reflecting and thinking it through. They don't know enough about it yet. They don't know all the drivers. That's for us to teach them the drivers, so that they can be therefore in a bit more control about what they do want to have happen, which is a clean question. So the questions, I would say things like, but for first mantra, if you're curious, not furious, you're probably on the right lines. So keep to that principle, because people get into a pickle about, oh, have I asked the right question? I would say avoid the why, be curious. And then some questions like, so normally teenagers respond by going, I don't know. I mean, that's, you know, you go, oh, you know, what's going on with your homework? I don't know, boring. So I at that, I always say, oh, you're not sure, you know, oh, boring, what kind of boring? So what kind of might sound a very strange question, but it's been proven to help young people to reflect a bit more deeply. Another one is, so what kind of, another one, oh, is there anything else about that? So they go, oh, it's just, you know, I hate that teacher. Oh, okay, you hate that teacher. What kind of hate? Oh, he's just so ridiculously strict about everything. Oh, okay. Oh, so he's strict. Okay. Is there anything else about that strict? So is there anything else about, and what kind of, are 2 really helpful questions that just help young people. Because when you're questioning, it's not for you to find the answer. That's the other trouble.
Listen
parents
to understand,
and
not to
adults,
fix.
listen to understand, because when you're questioning, it's to help the other person better understand what's going on for them, not for you to understand, because you're not the one who's got to do the homework.
Yeah.
So just say, oh, okay, and then every few questions you've got to put a bucket full of empathy in, so it goes back to that connection. So you say, do you know, I really get the fact that, you know, it's not going to be on your top list. Why would it be on top of your list? Yeah, I can understand that. So because that will help them feel felt. And then I do the when and when. Oh, so when the school are expecting you to get your homework in, and when you're finding it really boring and it's really difficult to motivate yourself, what could happen? So you just put that there on the plate. What could happen?
What's your thoughts, Kit? Sorry to interrupt. What's your thoughts on, because listening to what you're saying, and it's all so logical, and it's kind of, you know, wanting to remember it all, but there are times when you can't help it as human nature. When I've used clean questions with my daughter, and it works, and I'm you know, hands down it works. I used a lot of how, you know, what would you like to have happen is a real that question. Works, that one. But the thing is,
a really good question. If I just come to that just really quickly before we go on, just because it's really relevant. The what would you like to have happen is really good if the young person, the teenager, comes to you with their issues. Yes. Because you help them work it through, and then you say, oh, and when all of those friends are being like that with you and all of that, what would you like to have happen? Because it helps them to get into solution thinking rather than, oh, me, that's terrible. So sorry, Daisy, I interrupted
that out. Actually, it was a friendship conflict, and she did work it out in the stream of consciousness that came out after I asked that question. But I think that one of the difficulties from a parent's point of view is when if the child then starts to open up and starts to tell you all these things, is inside I seem to build up this resentment of, I haven't thought about how I feel about that. You know, have you had any idea how much pressure I'm under trying to get you to do the homework because of the teachers are saying that, you know, and then you do that thing, that awful projection of you're going to fail all the thingies, and you go, and you know that that's not going to help. But it's that thing of trying to have some kind of strategies of not. What doesn't work for me at all is when I try and tell my teenage daughters to think about me. No. And I'm wondering whether it's just because of their adolescent brain doesn't do it. Well, they do it randomly. Like some days they might just come in with a cup of tea, and maybe because they want to lift, but sometimes it's because they have realised on reflection after a while that they've not been very nice. But on the whole, I find it really hard to stop myself saying, have you any idea? Because I'm a single parent, right? Have you any idea what you're putting me through trying to sort all this out when I've got the pressure from the school or whatever? It's how do we stop ourselves from, because that's totally instant conflict at that point, you know?
I think there's two different elements to that. First of all, the more you understand about the teenage brain, the more you think, look, they're not doing this on purpose. They're not just trying to wind me up. You know, they're going through a period of individuation. They're trying to work out their own identity. They're wired to do that. Otherwise, they'd be living at home forever. I mean, many parents say to me, it's too long already. So, you know, if we don't help them through the process of individuation, they will be home forever. So they're trying to work out their own identities. They've got the hormones are there's lots of things going on, and therefore it's not that they can't be empathic. It's that at that time there's not enough room for. Now, what we do know is that empathy, the skill of empathy and emotional regulation, is some of these really, really important skills, which are called executive function skills. So emotional regulation, flexible thinking, working memory, processing speed, all of those are developed within the prefrontal cortex, which doesn't finish maturing until about 25, if not a bit more. So actually, their brain is not fully formed in the prefrontal cortex to be able to manage. Now, they can empathize. That's not to say they can't empathize. But when there's lots of other things going on, and when there's lots of other emotional drivers, the prefrontal cortex deactivates. We know that. And therefore, if you've already got not a completely matured prefrontal cortex, and you've got a lot of emotional drivers going on, you can see that you're not going to be able to empathize as much as you would when you haven't got any of those emotional drivers. So if you then, there was a little kitten who had a hurt paw, I bet your daughter would go, oh, because it's nothing, you know, and often they can give a lot of empathy to other people they know, because there's no other emotional drivers. There aren't, you know, it's not I'm trying to keep control, because when it comes to parents and teenagers, there's the emotional need to feel in control that the teenager has got. So that is always an emotional driver. Oh, I'm just going to be a bit aware here in case my mum decides she's going to start controlling the whole of my life. So you can see that in itself, the minute there's a conflict, she probably hasn't got the capacity for empathy. Yeah. Now, that I'm a real believer in when things are really, really calm, and when you've got your money in the bank for your relationship, then you can start saying, do you know what, this is how it is for me. So, you know, if, let's say, a parent is absolutely sick and tired of the fact that the house is always a mess and they have to do everything, well, that isn't okay, is it? It's not okay. You know, we've got to help our young people to take responsibility, and it's not okay for us to just go, oh, I'll just keep doing that and be angry about it. In fact, if we're doing that, we're taking quite a powerless position of what I call a fixer, or what Stephen Cartman called the rescuer, where we rescue our children, but we're very cross about doing it. So as we're tidying up the washing, putting the washing up into the dishwasher, we're like, I can't believe it's me doing this again.
Go on strike for ages, thinking, right, they want it this method, to see what happens, and the only
it will just go.
It just gets bigger and bigger, and they don't care.
Someone said to me, my stepchildren are now in their 30s, and the nice thing is, I don't think even I at the time, even though I knew lots of stuff, I didn't think, everyone, even if you really know about the brain, you still go for a period going, really? Has everything I've been teaching true? Will they ever come out of this? And I remember someone saying, oh, you just have to model what you want to happen. And I went, no, I've been showing them. I've been very, very ostentatiously putting all of the stuff in the dishwasher and saying things like, oh, and here's the dishwasher. Makes no difference whatsoever. So I think it's about when things are calm, when everyone's happy, and you have to be very, very careful how you go about it. So the way you introduce something which is of concern to you, like there's like that if you're the only one who does any cleaning around the house, and that's a concern to you, the way you introduce it has to be done so carefully, because what we know is the moment you bring it up, it will be woo in terms of the brain flip, which is they'll flip their lid, and it will be the emotional driver, because they'll go straight onto the defense. There'll be a sudden raise in cortisol, and they'll go, what are you talking about? Stop nagging me. So you have to be very, very careful how you go about it. And my top tip for that is we have to use I. If you use the word you when it's something of your concern, you're asking for the lid to be flipped. Oh, okay. The minute you say you. So don't use the word you. Only use I. All you're doing is sharing your perspective and saying what you would like to have happen. So you say, when I get home and when I see that the house is a real mess, I find it really, really stressful. Don't worry, I'm not cross with you. I'm not nagging you. I just want to say how it is for me. And then I think, oh, I'm never going to get any time to myself, and I find it really, really stressful. I'd love to find a way in which we can just share things out a bit more equally around here. And then I think the first time you bring that up, then you walk away, because you leave the map pin to be thinking. So you don't go for the first time wanting a solution to it. Now this is the trick, because it gives, the other thing is, young people, when they're on an emotional driver, when the prefrontal cortex I was talking to you about before, processing speed, or thinking speed as I just call it, because I say what's on the tin, that's controlled here within, well, the brain is very, very complex. So when I say this, every neuroscientist out there is going to go, because neuroscientists can be a little bit pedantic. But in terms of letting the general population know, the executive function skills are developed within the prefrontal cortex, and thinking speed, or processing speed, the speed with which you can process information, and that information can be visual and it can be auditory. It's less capable when you are on an emotional overdrive. So therefore, what often happens is adults want their children to come up with solutions to the homework, to the washing up, like that. but actually they need time sometimes just to process that. So it's much better to do the map pin, to say how it is for you, and just to leave it as an open thing. I'd really love to find a way in which we can, you know, I can have a bit more time to myself, because that's what you really want. Really want. You want a bit more time to yourself. So don't say what I want is for you. Yeah, I'd love to find a solution for you to do more around here, because that's not really the concern. The concern is you having more time to yourself. So it takes quite a lot of practice to unpeel and unpeel and unpeel until you get to really what your concern is. What's your real concern? And yeah, so I would say my 2 top tips are: use I, not you, and put the map pin in, and only put the map pin in when everyone's calm. I say, think of it like a boiling kettle. You would, you know, you wouldn't put your hand in a boiling kettle, would you? You wouldn't do it. So if you see your teenager even look vaguely a little bit defensive, that means the kettle's boiling. Don't put your hand in. Say something nice, calm, connect. Something like, oh, I can see you don't feel great. Don't worry, I'm on your side. We'll leave it. Say something like that. Because the more you do that, the more they'll genuinely believe that you really are on their side. Because some young people feel that they're getting it from both sides. They're like, oh, I've got the school nagging me about homework. I've now got my mum nagging me about homework. I got a detention at school today, and now I'm getting nagged at home for it as well. And I have, you know, many years ago, it was a woman from the NSPCC, and at the time I think I was a deputy head at the time, and it was during those days, you know, I'm not a believer now in punitive approaches, but sanctions and rewards were very much, you know, unfortunately they're still ubiquitous today, even though we know much more about the brain. And she'd said about this lad, the trouble is, what's happening is he gets, you know, misses his play, or you know, these things that shouldn't really happen. And then he goes home and he gets his parents going, oh, well, that's terrible. You missed your play. Right, that's it. You're not having your PlayStation tonight. So they get a kind of double whammy. And she said, imagine if it was you. And I thought, yeah, imagine as an adult, something happens where you don't feel great at work, and someone says, oh, you haven't got that report ready. And then you got home and your family went, well, you didn't get that report ready today. Well, that's terrible. Now you're not having any telly. You'd be like, what?
I know.
And I think sometimes we forget what it's like being a young person. You know, that's the kind of thing where it really hit me. And I've carried that with me ever since, and just thought, yeah, do you know what? Every young person needs to know that Dr. Bruce Perry talks about relational safety. And I cannot underestimate what an important thing that is. If there's one thing a parent can do for their child, it's to help them feel supported, listened to, and understood. If you do those 3 things, then, and you do it well enough and you do it authentically enough, it will enable you to then tackle with them some of the difficult stuff, and to go, look, I really would love to talk to you about you going out and smoking whatever,
Risky behaviour.
doing, you know, getting involved. I'm just going to call it risky behaviour before I give away too much about my own past. So yeah. So, and I think you can then tackle the big stuff, but you can't tackle the big stuff unless you've really worked on the relationship. And then you can tackle the big stuff in a way in which your child knows you really are on their side. You're not going to make them do anything. You're going to help. You're going to be there to help them. So when it comes, I don't know if you want me to carry, because I know that some people have talked about risky behaviours.
Yeah, I mean,
concern.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering whether that's a whole another Q&A, if there's so much around that. And I think especially if we're heading in, we don't know what's going on with lockdown. We don't know whether there's going to be more local lockdowns, or whether we're heading into a giant national one, and hopefully not. But that's definitely something that's on the minds of many parents as to is their child safe when they're away from the home, and are they getting into difficulty? But I think that's something that we should maybe carry over to another Q&A, because I think there's a whole load of stuff there. I mean, I'm acutely aware of the time, Kix. I know you've got so many important things to go on and do today, and but there's so much help that you have said there, and it resonates massively with me, being a parent of 2 teens and being a single mum. So I'd just like to say thank you once again for your sage advice. And what I think we're going to do is take some of those snippets and put those out as individual posts, because they're things that I'd like to remember myself. And I think that thing of say I, not you, and you know, if I'd have remembered that the other night when I was screaming about the sink.
And Daisy, the boiled kettle, because you probably wouldn't put your hand in the boiled kettle either.
Exactly.
And the one thing that I would say that I haven't really said, which I think is really important, is that, of course, we're human as well. And so we've got to have an outlet for the raising of our cortisol levels. It would definitely not be healthy if our cortisol levels are raised all the time. So we've got to, you know, it's really worth thinking through what do I need as a parent to try and get some calmness, because actually while I'm relationship building and I can't tackle, you can't change young people overnight. It takes time.
Absolutely right.
And they're teenagers, so there will be things coming up. So it's also about saying, you know, what parachute of support have you got? Who's there for you? Where you can actually just, not even necessarily just go, but sometimes just to actually forget about it, fill yourself up with some feel-good chemicals, which, you know, we'll talk about at a different time, and really get to empty that stress balloon and feel calm again. Because if you're always on high alert and feel a bit about the children, then that will take its toll. So every adult's got to find some way of being able to find some calm within their daily life, which is hard. And it might be hiding in the toilet for a while.
Yeah. And I must say that one of the things I love about the Facebook group, the Raising Teens in Lockdown Facebook group, is there's so many parents on there helping each other. And the other thing that's brilliant is humour, you know, that we can actually be really honest on there. And there's some fantastic funny stuff that happens, because, you know, life is funny at times, even if it's incredibly frustrating. So that helps a lot as well. But so there's so much there. I think, you know, I'll sign off by saying thank you so much, Kit. I think you're amazing.
Go put money in that bank, Daisy.
I will. And I think the work that Changing Chances are doing, because I know a lot about what you're doing with parents, is just absolutely fantastic. And I think there's so much more. If people want to look at what Changing Chances do, we've got help and advice on our Make Good Trouble website, but also there's the Changing Chances. Is it .co.uk, your website?
Yep, just www.changingchances.co.uk. Yeah,
brilliant,
lovely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you
really
so
nice to see you today, Daisy. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.